Keanu Reeves went into a coma. When he woke up, he was shocked to see who was there, and almost fainted. The incessant beeping of medical equipment slowly penetrated the fog in Keanu Reeves's mind. His eyelids felt heavy, as if weighed down by lead, but he fought to open them. The harsh fluorescent lights above him made him wince, and he blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to his surroundings. As his vision cleared, Keanu realized he was in a hospital room. The sterile white walls and the antiseptic smell were unmistakable. He tried to move, but his body felt weak and unresponsive. Panic began to rise in his chest as he struggled to piece together how he had ended up here. The last thing he remembered was driving home after a major awards ceremony in Los Angeles. He had been alone in his car, the city lights blurring past his windows. And then, nothing. A complete blank. Keanu's throat felt dry and scratchy as he attempted to speak. "Water," he managed to croak out, his voice barely above a whisper. "Here you go, buddy," a familiar voice said, and Keanu felt a straw touch his lips. He sipped gratefully, the cool liquid soothing his parched throat. As he finished drinking, Keanu's eyes focused on the person holding the cup, and his heart nearly stopped. Sitting in the chair beside his bed, looking as if he belonged there, was Carter Sullivan, Keanu's ex-best friend and former manager, whom he hadn't seen in over 15 years. The same Carter Sullivan who had been accused of embezzling millions from Keanu's fortune before vanishing without a trace. Keanu's mind reeled. What was Carter doing here? How long had he been unconscious? And why did Carter look so comfortable, as if nothing had ever happened between them? "Easy there, Keanu," Carter said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You've been out for quite a while. The doctor said you might be disoriented when you woke up." Keanu tried to speak again, but Carter gently shushed him. "Don't strain yourself. You need to rest and regain your strength. We have plenty of time to talk later." As Keanu struggled to process the situation, a nurse entered the room. Her eyes widened when she saw that Keanu was awake. "Mr. Reeves, it's wonderful to see you conscious. I'll page the doctor right away. While we wait for the next part of this thrilling story to unfold, we'd love to hear from you, our amazing viewers. If you're enjoying this tale of mystery and suspense, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring more exciting stories like this one to life. Don't forget to leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you think might happen next. Now let's get back to Keanu's unexpected awakening. The doctor arrived shortly after, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a reassuring smile. "Mr. Reeves, I'm Dr. Amelia Chen. It's good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" Keanu swallowed hard, his mind still reeling from Carter's presence. "Confused," he managed to say. What happened to me?" Dr. Chen's expression turned serious. "You were in a car accident, Mr. Reeves, a severe one. You've been in a coma for the past 6 months. 6 months. The words hit Keanu like a physical blow. He had lost half a year of his life. But that still didn't explain why Carter was here, acting as if nothing had ever come between them. "The accident," Keanu said, his voice growing stronger. "What caused it?" Dr. Chen glanced at Carter before answering. "The initial investigation pointed to a mechanical failure in your vehicle. The brakes malfunctioned, causing you to lose control on a winding road." Something about her explanation didn't sit right with Keanu, but he couldn't put his finger on why. His memories of that night were frustratingly blank. "You're very lucky. Mr. Reeves," Dr. Chen continued, "your injuries were severe, but you've made a remarkable recovery. With some physical therapy, we expect you to regain full functionality." As the doctor continued to explain his condition and the road to recovery ahead, Keanu found his attention drifting back to Carter. The man sat quietly, a look of concern on his face that seemed genuine. But Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When Dr. Chen finished her explanation and left the room, promising to return later for more tests, an uncomfortable silence fell between Keanu and Carter. Finally, Keanu couldn't take it anymore. "What are you doing here, Carter?" he asked, his voice low and wary. Carter leaned forward, his expression a mix of guilt and relief. I know this must be a shock, Keanu. I never thought I'd see you again, let alone be sitting here when you woke up. That doesn't answer my question, Keanu pressed, fighting to keep his emotions in check. Carter sighed deeply. It's a long story, one that I'm not sure you're ready to hear right now. But the short version is, I never stole from you, Keanu. I was set up, forced to disappear. And when I heard about your accident, I couldn't stay away, not this time. Keanu's mind raced. Could it be true? Had he been wrong about Carter all these years? But the evidence had been so overwhelming. Before Keanu could respond, the door opened and a familiar face appeared. It was his current manager, Sarah Weston, looking flustered and out of breath. Keanu! Oh, thank God you're awake, she exclaimed, rushing to his bedside. Then her eyes fell on Carter, and her expression hardened. What is he doing here? Carter stood up, his posture defensive. I have every right to be here, Sarah. More than you know. Sarah looked like she was about to argue, but Keanu held up a weak hand. Please, he said, his head starting to throb. Not now. I need some time to process all of this. Sarah nodded reluctantly, shooting Carter a suspicious glare. Of course, Keanu, I'll be right outside if you need anything. As Sarah left the room, Keanu closed his eyes, feeling overwhelmed. When he opened them again, Carter was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. I know you have no reason to trust me, Carter said softly, not turning around. But I promise you, Keanu, I'm here to help. There's so much you don't know, so much that's happened while you were asleep. Keanu wanted to demand answers, to understand why his world seemed to have turned upside down in the blink of an eye. But exhaustion was creeping in, his body still weak from months of inactivity. Get some rest, Carter said, finally turning to face him. I'll be here when you wake up. We have a lot to talk about. As Keanu drifted off to sleep, his mind swirled with questions. Why couldn't he remember anything from before the accident? Why did he have a nagging feeling that he had been investigating something important? And most pressingly, could he trust Carter, the man who had once been closer than a brother, only to betray him so completely? Little did Keanu know, his awakening was just the beginning of a nightmare that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his life, his career, and the people he trusted most. Days passed, and Keanu's strength slowly returned. Physical. Therapy sessions left him exhausted, but determined to regain his former agility. Throughout it all, Carter remained a constant presence, always ready with a word of encouragement or a helping hand. Despite his initial suspicion, Keanu found himself warming to Carter's presence. The easy camaraderie they had once shared seemed to be resurfacing, and Keanu caught himself laughing at Carter's jokes, reminiscing about old times. But there were moments when a shadow would pass over Carter's face, or he would check his phone with an inexplicable urgency that made Keanu wonder if there was more to his old friend's return than met the eye. One afternoon, as Keanu was resting, after a particularly grueling therapy session, Sarah burst into the room, her face flushed with anger. Keanu, we need to talk, she said, glaring at Carter. Alone. Carter raised his hands in a gesture of peace. I'll give you two some privacy, he said, heading for the door. But as he passed Sarah, Keanu saw him slip something into her hand, a small folded piece of paper. Once Carter was gone, Sarah approached Keanu's bed, her expression grave. There's something you need to know, she began. While you were in the coma, Carter, he's been making moves, big ones. Keanu felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? Sarah took a deep breath. He somehow managed to gain control of several of your business ventures, your production company, some of your biggest contracts. He's been acting with power of attorney, claiming you had given him authority before the accident. Keanu's mind reeled. That's impossible. I would never... I know, Sarah interrupted. But he has documentation, Keanu, signed papers, dated just days before your accident. I've been fighting it, but without your testimony. Keanu felt as if the room was spinning. Could Carter have betrayed him again? Had the past few days been nothing but an elaborate act? As Sarah continued to detail the extent of Carter's actions, Keanu's head began to throb. Flashes of memory assaulted him, fragments of conversations, glimpses of documents, a growing sense of unease. He had been investigating something before the accident, something about his own finances. But the details remained frustratingly out of reach. "Keanu, are you all right?" Sarah's voice sounded distant, concerned. He tried to focus on her, but the pain in his head was intensifying. I need to rest," he managed to say, before darkness claimed him once more. When Keanu awoke again, it was night. The hospital room was dimly lit, and for a moment, he thought he was alone. Then he noticed a figure sitting in the shadows. Carter. "Welcome back," Carter said softly, leaning forward into the light. "You gave us quite a scare." Keanu struggled to sit up, his mind clear despite the lingering ache in his temples. "What's going on, Carter?" he demanded. "Sarah told me—" "I know what Sarah told you," Carter interrupted, his voice tinged with sadness. "And I can explain everything, but first you need to understand. Nothing is as it seems, Keanu, nothing." As Carter began to speak, weaving a tale of conspiracy, hidden agendas, and dangerous secrets, Keanu felt as if he was falling down a rabbit hole. With each revelation, the world he thought he knew crumbled a little more. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The accident that had put him in a coma was no accident at all, and the truth behind it was more terrifying than anything Keanu could have imagined. Carter's words hung heavy in the air, each revelation more shocking than the last. Keanu listened, his mind racing to keep up with the torrent of information. "You have to understand, Keanu," Carter said, his voice low and urgent. "I never wanted to leave. 15 years ago, when I was accused of embezzling from you, it was all a setup. Someone powerful wanted me out of the picture, and they were willing to destroy our friendship to make it happen." Keanu's brow furrowed. "But the evidence was fabricated," Carter finished, "every last bit of it. I was given a choice: disappear and stay quiet, or face consequences that would have destroyed not just me, but you as well." The weight of Carter's words settled on Keanu like a physical burden. Could it be true? Had he spent the last 15 years believing a lie? "Why now?" Keanu asked, his voice hoarse. "Why come back after all this time?" Carter's expression darkened. "Because what happened to you wasn't an accident, Keanu, and I couldn't stand by and watch them try to finish what they started." As Carter continued to explain, painting a picture of a vast conspiracy involving some of Hollywood's most powerful players, Keanu felt a chill run down his spine. According to Carter, Keanu had been on the verge of uncovering a massive financial fraud scheme just before his accident, a scheme that implicated not just movie studios, but high-ranking executives, politicians, and even some of Keanu's closest associates. "Your investigation was getting too close," Carter said. "They couldn't risk you exposing everything, so they decided to take you out of the game. The brake failure in your car, it was no mechanical error. It was deliberate." Keanu's head spun with the implications. "But why keep me alive? Why not just kill you?" Carter finished grimly. "Because dead men tell no tales, but they also can't be manipulated. With you in a coma, they could control the narrative, use your name, your influence, to further their agenda. And if you ever woke up, they could discredit me," Keanu realized, the pieces falling into place. "Make it seem like the accident had affected my mind, that I couldn't be trusted." Carter nodded solemnly. "Exactly. That's why I had to step in, to take control of your assets before they could. It was the only way to protect you and buy us time to expose the truth." As Keanu processed this information, a nurse entered the room to check his vitals. The conversation paused, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. When they were alone again, Keanu turned to Carter, his expression resolute. "What do we do now?" he asked. Carter leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "We fight back, but we have to be careful. They're watching, always watching. We need to gather evidence, build our case, and most importantly, we need to figure out who we can trust." Over the next few days, as Keanu continued his recovery, he and Carter worked in secret. They pored over financial records, made discreet phone calls, and pieced together the fragments of Keanu's pre-accident investigation. But the more they dug, the more dangerous their situation became. Strange occurrences began to plague Keanu's hospital stay. Missing medical charts, unexplained changes in his medication, nurses he didn't recognize entering his room at odd hours. One night, as Keanu was drifting off to sleep, he heard a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, the sound of a scuffle, then silence. The next morning he learned that a member of the hospital staff had been found unconscious in a supply closet, with no memory of how he'd gotten there. The incident left Keanu shaken, but more determined than ever to uncover the truth. As his strength returned, so did his resolve. He began to push himself harder in physical therapy, knowing that he would need all his faculties to face the challenges ahead. But even as Keanu and Carter made progress in their investigation, doubts lingered in the back of Keanu's mind. Could he truly trust Carter after all these years? Was there more to this story than his old friend was letting on? These questions gnawed at Keanu, especially in the quiet hours of the night when sleep eluded him. He found himself analyzing every interaction, every piece of information, searching for inconsistencies or hidden motives. One afternoon, as Keanu was reviewing some financial documents Carter had brought him, Sarah knocked on the door. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. "Keanu, we need to talk," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Alone?" Keanu nodded, setting aside the papers. "Of course, what's wrong?" Sarah closed the door and approached his bed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been doing some digging of my own," she said, "and I found something disturbing." She pulled out her phone, bringing up a series of emails and documents. As Keanu scrolled through them, his blood ran cold. The emails detailed conversations between Carter and several of the very executives they suspected of being involved in the fraud scheme. "These are dated from just a few weeks before your accident," Sarah explained. "It looks like Carter was in deep with these people, Keanu. I don't think he's being entirely truthful with you." Keanu's mind raced. Could Carter have been playing him this whole time? Was this all an elaborate ruse to gain his trust and access to his resources? Before he could respond, the door opened and Carter walked in. He froze when he saw Sarah, his eyes darting between her and the phone in Keanu's hand. "What's going on?" Carter asked, his voice tight. The tension in the room was palpable. Keanu looked from Carter to Sarah, feeling as if he was standing on the edge of a precipice. Who could he trust? What was the truth? "Carter," Keanu said slowly, "I think it's time you told me everything. And I mean everything." Carter's shoulders sagged, as if a great weight had settled upon them. He closed the door and took a seat, his eyes never leaving Keanu's face. "You're right," he said softly. "There's more to the story, but it's not what you think." As Carter began to speak, weaving a tale more complex and dangerous than anything Keanu had imagined, the true depth of the conspiracy began to unfold. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about reshaping the entire entertainment industry, with implications that reached into the highest levels of government. "I had to play both sides," Carter explained, his voice filled with regret. "It was the only way to get close enough to gather the evidence we needed. But I swear to you, Keanu, everything I've done has been to protect you and bring these people to justice." Sarah listened, her expression a mix of skepticism and growing horror, as she realized the scope of what they were dealing with. As the truth came to light, Keanu felt as if the ground beneath him was shifting. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his career, and the people around him was being called into question. But before they could discuss their next move, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. The sound of running feet and panicked voices filled the hallway outside. Carter rushed to the window, his face paling as he looked out. "They're here," he said, his voice tight with fear. "We're out of time." Keanu struggled to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Who's here? What's happening?" But before Carter could answer, the door burst open. A team of men in dark suits poured into the room, their faces grim and determined. "Keanu Reeves," the leader said, flashing a badge, "we need you to come with us, for your own protection." Keanu looked to Carter and Sarah, seeing the panic in their eyes. In that moment he knew this was it, the moment everything would change. As the men moved to take him, Keanu made a split-second decision. With a burst of strength he didn't know he possessed, he lunged for the window. The glass shattered around him as he fell, the world spinning in a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. As the ground rushed up to meet him, Keanu had only one thought. The game was on, and he was playing for his life. The impact never came. Instead, Keanu found himself jerked to a stop, suspended in mid-air. He looked up to see Carter leaning out the broken window, gripping Keanu's arm with both hands, his face contorted with the effort of holding him. "I've got you!" Carter yelled, straining to pull Keanu back up. Below, chaos erupted as hospital. Staff and patients poured out of the building, pointing and shouting at the scene unfolding above them. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder by the second. With a final surge of strength, Carter managed to haul Keanu back through the window. They tumbled to the floor, gasping for breath, as Sarah barricaded the door with a heavy medical cart. "We need to move," Carter panted, struggling to his feet. "They'll be through that door any second." Keanu's mind raced. "The service elevator," he said, remembering the layout of the hospital from his many walks during physical therapy. "Here's down the hall, leads straight to the parking garage." Carter nodded, helping Keanu up. "Good thinking. Sarah, can you create a distraction?" Sarah, her face set with determination, nodded. "I'll do what I can. You two go. I'll meet you at the safe house we discussed." As Sarah prepared to face the men outside, Carter and Keanu slipped out onto the balcony that ran along the side of the building. The cool night air hit Keanu's face, clearing his head and sharpening his focus. They made their way along the narrow ledge, the sounds of pursuit growing behind them. Keanu's muscles screamed in protest, still weak from months of inactivity, but adrenaline and sheer will kept him moving. They reached the service elevator, just as shouts echoed down the hallway. Carter punched the button repeatedly, muttering under his breath. "Come on, come on!" The elevator dinged, the doors sliding open agonizingly slowly. They rushed inside, Carter jamming the button for the parking level as running footsteps approached. As the doors began to close, Keanu caught a glimpse of the men in suits rounding the corner, their faces twisted in anger. Then the elevator was descending, leaving the chaos behind. "What now?" Keanu asked, leaning against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Carter ran a hand through his hair, his eyes wild. "We run. We gather what evidence we can, and we expose everything. It's our only chance." The elevator reached the parking level, and they stepped out cautiously. The garage was eerily quiet, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows between the parked cars. "This way," Carter said, leading Keanu towards a nondescript sedan parked in a corner. "I've had this ready, just in case." As they approached the car, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby pillar. Keanu's heart leapt into his throat, but then he recognized the silhouette. "Sarah," he called out, relief flooding through him. But as Sarah stepped into the light, Keanu's blood ran cold. She wasn't alone. Next to her stood a man Keanu recognized, all too well. Studio executive Maxwell Rothberg, one of the key players in the conspiracy they were trying to unravel. "I'm sorry, Keanu," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "They got to me. They have my family." Maxwell smiled, a cold, predatory expression that sent chills down Keanu's spine. "Mr. Reeves, Mr. Sullivan," he said smoothly, "I believe it's time we had a little chat." As Keanu and Carter stood frozen, caught between Sarah's betrayal and the approaching sound of reinforcements, they knew that their next move would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of an entire industry. The game had changed, and the stakes had never been higher. The parking garage fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Keanu's mind raced, trying to process Sarah's betrayal and the sudden appearance of Maxwell Rothberg. Carter stood beside him, his body tense, ready for action. "Now, gentlemen," Maxwell said, his voice smooth as silk but laced with venom, "let's not do anything rash. We're all reasonable people here, aren't we?" Keanu's eyes darted between Maxwell, Sarah, and the exits. He could hear the approaching footsteps of what he assumed were more of Maxwell's men. They were trapped. "What do you want, Maxwell?" Keanu asked, buying time as he tried to formulate a plan. Maxwell's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. What I've always wanted, Keanu. Control, power, and you've become quite the thorn in my side. We know about the fraud, Carter interjected, his voice steady despite the dire situation. We have evidence. A flicker of annoyance crossed Maxwell's face. Evidence? You have nothing but speculation and hearsay. But I'm willing to be generous. Come with us quietly and we can discuss terms. As Maxwell spoke, Keanu noticed Sarah's hand moving slowly towards her pocket. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and he saw a flicker of something, regret, determination, in her gaze. In that instant, Keanu made a decision. He lunged forward, tackling Maxwell to the ground just as Sarah pulled out a small device and pressed a button. The garage was plunged into darkness as the lights went out, plunging them all into chaos. "Run!" Sarah's voice cut through the confusion. Keanu felt Carter's hand grab his arm, pulling him up and away from the sounds of struggle. They ran blindly through the dark garage, the shouts and curses of Maxwell and his men echoing behind them. As they reached the exit ramp, headlights suddenly blinded them. A car screeched to a halt and the passenger door flew open. "Get in," Sarah yelled from the driver's seat. Without hesitation, Keanu and Carter dove into the car. Sarah floored the accelerator before they could even close the door, tires squealing as they shot up the ramp and out into the night. "What the hell just happened?" Carter demanded as they sped through the streets of Los Angeles. Sarah's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry for the deception back there. I had to make it convincing. I've been working undercover, trying to gather evidence against Maxwell and his cronies for months." Keanu's head was spinning. "But your family are safe," Sarah finished. "That was a bluff. But Maxwell's reach is long, and I couldn't risk tipping him off until I had what we needed." As Sarah drove, weaving through traffic with practiced ease, she explained how she had been recruited by a task force investigating corruption in the entertainment industry. Her position as Keanu's manager had given her unprecedented access to the inner workings of Hollywood's elite. "The accident changed everything," she said, her voice tight. "I knew they were onto you, Keanu, but I couldn't warn you without blowing my cover. When you went into the coma, I had to play along, pretend to be just as surprised and suspicious of Carter as they expected me to be." Carter leaned forward from the back seat. "So, all this time, you've been gathering evidence?" Sarah nodded. "And now we have everything we need to bring them down. But we're not out of the woods yet. Maxwell will have every dirty cop and private security firm in the city looking for us." As if on cue, the wail of sirens pierced the night behind them. In the rearview mirror, Keanu could see a fleet of black SUVs gaining on them. "Hold on," Sarah warned, making a sharp turn down a narrow alley. The car bounced and scraped as Sarah navigated the tight space, emerging onto a busy street. She wove through traffic, running red lights and narrowly avoiding collisions. "Where are we going?" Keanu asked, gripping the dashboard as they took another sharp turn. "Somewhere. They'll never think to look," Sarah replied cryptically. As they drove, Keanu's mind raced. The past few days felt like a lifetime, each revelation more shocking than the last. He glanced at Carter, seeing the same mix of determination and uncertainty in his old friend's eyes. After what felt like hours of evasive driving, Sarah finally slowed the car, pulling into an underground parking garage beneath an unremarkable apartment building. "We should be safe here, at least for now," she said, leading them to a service elevator. The elevator took them to the top floor, where Sarah used a key card to access a hidden penthouse suite. As they entered, Keanu was surprised to see walls covered in monitors, computers, and file cabinets. "Welcome to the command center," Sarah said, a hint of pride in her voice. "This is where we've been coordinating the entire investigation." As Sarah booted up the computers and began pulling out files, Keanu and Carter exchanged looks of amazement. The scope of the operation was far beyond anything they had imagined. "So, what's the plan now?" Carter asked, scanning the information displayed on the monitors. Sarah's expression turned grim. "We go public. We have enough evidence to implicate not just Maxwell, but dozens of high-ranking executives, politicians, and even some A-list celebrities in this fraud scheme. Once this hits the media, there will be no stopping it." Keanu nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "And what about me? What's my role in all of this? Sarah turned to him, her eyes serious. You're the key, Keanu. Your reputation, your integrity. It's what will make people listen. We need you to be the face of this expose. The room fell silent. As Keanu considered the implications, his entire career, his life's work, would be forever changed by what they were about to do. But as he thought about the corruption they had uncovered, the lives that had been ruined by the greed of a powerful few, he knew there was only one choice. I'm in, he said firmly. Whatever it takes. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah coordinated with her contacts in the media and law enforcement, preparing for the moment they would go public. Carter pored over financial records, connecting the final dots in their case. And Keanu recorded a video statement, laying out the evidence and calling for justice. As dawn broke over Los Angeles, they were ready. With a final nod from Sarah, Keanu pressed the button that would send their evidence and his statement to every major news outlet in the country. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Social media exploded with outrage and disbelief. News channels ran non-stop coverage, dissecting every piece of evidence. From their hidden command center, Keanu, Carter, and Sarah watched as the empire they had sought to expose began to crumble. Arrests were made, resignations tendered, and denials issued, but the evidence was irrefutable. As the day wore on, Keanu felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They had done it. They had exposed the truth. But their victory was short-lived. As night fell, alarms suddenly blared throughout the command center. On the security cameras, they could see a team of armed men making their way up the building. "They found us," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. "We need to move, now." They rushed to gather what they could, destroying what couldn't be taken. As they prepared to make their escape, Keanu paused, a realization hitting him. "Wait," he said, turning to Carter and Sarah. "This is exactly what they want, us running, hiding. It makes us look guilty." Carter's brow furrowed. "What are you suggesting?" Keanu took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "We face them, head on. No more running." Sarah looked at him like he was crazy. "Keanu, these men are here to kill us. This isn't a movie." "No," Keanu agreed, a determined glint in his eye. "It's better. It's the truth, and the world is watching." Before Sarah or Carter could protest further, Keanu strode to the door. With a final glance at his friends, he opened it and stepped out into the hallway. The armed men, clearly not expecting such a brazen move, hesitated. Keanu raised his hands slowly, his voice calm but carrying the weight of truth. "Gentlemen," he said, "I think it's time we had a real conversation. The whole world is watching now. What happens next is up to you." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the leader of the team lowered his weapon. One by one, the others followed suit. In that moment, as sirens wailed in the distance and the first rays of a new dawn peeked over the horizon, Keanu knew that everything had changed. The battle was far from over, but the truth was out there, impossible to ignore or suppress. As he was led away, Keanu caught sight of Carter and Sarah watching from the doorway. Their faces were a mix of fear, pride, and hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In the days and weeks that followed, the full extent of the corruption was revealed. The entertainment industry was shaken to its core, with sweeping reforms and investigations launched. Keanu found himself at the center of a media storm, hailed as a hero by some and vilified by others. But through it all, he remained steadfast in his commitment to the truth. His career took on a new dimension as he used his platform to advocate for transparency and accountability in Hollywood and beyond. Carter, exonerated of the crimes he had been accused of years ago, worked tirelessly to help those who had been victimized by the fraud scheme. His friendship with Keanu, tested by time and circumstance, emerged stronger than ever. Sarah's role in the investigation was eventually made public, earning her accolades and a new position heading up an industry watchdog organization. As for Maxwell Rothberg and his co-conspirators, they faced the full force of the law. The trials that followed would be remembered as some of the most significant in Hollywood history, Months later, as Keanu stood on the balcony of his home, looking out over the city he had helped to change, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The accident that had nearly claimed his life had set in motion a chain of events that had exposed a deep-rooted corruption and paved the way for real change. He thought about the many lives that had been affected, both the victims of the fraud and those who had perpetrated it. The road ahead was long, and there would undoubtedly be more battles to fight. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. A knock at the door interrupted his musings. It was Carter, holding a newspaper with the headline, "Hollywood. Reform Bill Passes. Keanu Reeves hails new era of accountability." "Not bad for a couple of has-beens, huh?" Carter said with a grin. Keanu laughed, a genuine, heartfelt sound that seemed to chase away the last shadows of the ordeal they had been through. "You know," Keanu said, looking out at the city once more, "I think this might be my favorite role yet." As the sun set on Los Angeles, casting a golden glow over the city, Keanu knew that while one chapter had closed, another was just beginning. And whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them, with the truth as his guide and his friends by his side.